5 boys. One night that would change their lives forever. Welcome to The Money Trail. I'm your host. Tonight we delve into one of America's most notorious miscarriages of justice, the Central Park Five. It was April 19, 1989 in New York City. A 28-year-old investment banker named Tricia Mailey went for a jog in Central Park after work. She would become the victim of a horrific sexual assault and near-fatal beating. The case seized headlines, sparking fear and outrage across the city. Enter Antoine Lecrae, Kevin Richardson, Yusuf Salaam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise, 4 Black and 1 Hispanic teenager aged 14 to 16. Arrested separately that night, they were accused of being part of a wilding gang that terrorized Central Park. Despite their denials, they were coerced into confessions, which the prosecution used to indict them for Mailey's assault. But here's where things get interesting and infuriating. Unbeknownst to many, this case was also a battleground for big money and political power. Real estate developers, eager to cash in on NYC's burgeoning commercial scene, funneled millions into the campaigns of ambitious district attorneys. One such DA, Robert Morgenthau, made his name as a tough-on-crime prosecutor by aggressively pursuing the Central Park Five case. Meanwhile, civil rights advocates and legal aid groups rallied to defend the boys, but they were outspent and outgunned by deep-pocketed opponents. In the end, the five spent years in prison for a crime they didn't commit, their lives upended by a system that prioritized profit over justice. So tonight, we follow the money trail to uncover the financial forces that shaped this landmark case. We'll expose the shady dealings between real estate moguls and city officials, and reveal how big money continues to skew our criminal justice system. But above all, we remember the Central Park Five, 5 innocent boys whose lives were forever altered by a ruthless machine fueled by greed and ambition. 20 minutes into the night of April 19, 1989, New York City. Amidst a backdrop of soaring crime rates and racial tension, the case of the Central Park Five unfolds. But behind the scenes, there's another story, one of financial resources that fueled the prosecution. Real estate moguls, like Donald Trump, had a vested interest in maintaining the perception of a lawless city to justify their aggressive development and gentrification efforts. In his newspaper, the Trump Organization ran full-page ads demanding the death penalty for the Central Park Five. These ads cost an estimated $85,000, a small price to pay for stoking fear and rallying public support for tough on-crime policies. Meanwhile, city officials, including Mayor Ed Koch and District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, faced intense pressure to solve high-profile crimes. Their reputations and political careers depended on it. With deep pockets and powerful connections, these figures had the means to shape public opinion, influence investigative priorities, and control the narrative around the case. But where did this money come from? One potential source is the Law and Order Party, a coalition of politicians, law enforcement officials, and wealthy donors who backed candidates and policies that prioritized law and order over civil liberties and social justice. By funneling millions of dollars into campaigns, lobbying efforts, and media campaigns, these groups wielded significant influence over the criminal justice system. Another source of funding came from the corporate interests that stood to gain from gentrification and urban development. Real estate developers, construction firms, and financial institutions all had a stake in maintaining a tough on-crime image for the city. By contributing to political campaigns and advocacy organizations, they helped create an environment where public safety was prioritized over due process and civil rights. In total, the prosecution of the Central Park Five cost an estimated $20 million, a staggering sum that dwarfed the resources available to the defense. This imbalance in financial power helped tip the scales of justice against the 5 defendants, who were ultimately exonerated after serving years in prison. As we examine the money trail behind the Central Park Five case, we must confront the uncomfortable truth that big money continues to skew our criminal justice system. By shining a light on these hidden financial forces, we can begin to hold accountable those who seek to profit from fear, division, and injustice. As we delve deeper into the Central Park Five case, it's impossible to ignore the role the media played in shaping public opinion and driving the narrative around this tragic miscarriage of justice. In 1989, a young woman was brutally attacked while jogging in New York City's Central Park. 5 Black and Latino teenagers were soon arrested and charged with the crime, despite a lack of concrete evidence linking them to the attack. During this time, the media was ravenous for information about the case, and the families of the 5 defendants alleged that law enforcement leaked damaging, but false, details about the teens to the press. This included salacious claims that they had confessed to a wilding spree in the park, during which they assaulted numerous other victims. These allegations were widely reported and helped to cement the narrative of the Central Park Five as guilty parties in the minds of the public. But who stood to gain from this rush to judgment? As it turns out, there were powerful financial incentives at play. The city's tabloid newspapers, including the New York Post and the Daily News, saw a significant boost in sales as they competed to provide the most sensational coverage of the case. Meanwhile, prominent real estate developers and other wealthy individuals, many of whom had close ties to then Mayor Ed Koch, used their influence to shape public opinion and ensure that the 5 defendants were punished to the fullest extent of the law. One such developer was Donald Trump, who took out full-page ads in all 4 of the city's major newspapers calling for the death penalty for the Central Park Five. At the time, Trump was attempting to position himself as a champion of law and order, and his inflammatory rhetoric played well with his base of supporters. But his actions also served to further demonize the 5 defendants, making it even more difficult for them to receive a fair trial. In the end, of course, the Central Park 5 were exonerated after serving years in prison, but the damage had already been done, both to their lives and to the fabric of our criminal justice system. As we continue to follow the money trail behind this case, it's crucial that we acknowledge the role that media and financial incentives played in perpetuating this terrible injustice. Only by shining a light on these hidden forces can we hope to hold those responsible accountable and prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. As we delve deeper into the tangled web of financial interests surrounding the Central Park 5 case, it's impossible to ignore the potential conflicts of interest and even corruption among some of the key law enforcement and legal officials involved. Take, for example, Linda Fairstein, the head of the Sex Crimes Prosecution Unit in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office at the time. Fairstein was a driving force behind the prosecution of the 5 teenagers, and her dogged determination to secure convictions raised more than a few eyebrows among her colleagues. But it wasn't just her professional ambition that caused concern. In the years leading up to the Central Park jogger case, Fairstein had cultivated close ties with powerful media figures, including former New York Daily News editor Pete Hamill and former New York Times reporter Jim Dwyer. These relationships would prove invaluable in shaping public opinion against the 5 defendants, as the tabloid press launched a relentless campaign of sensationalized headlines and salacious details about the case. Meanwhile, on the law enforcement side, there were equally troubling connections at play. The lead detective on the case, Michael Sheehan, had a history of aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. In 1987, he was transferred out of the NYPD's elite major case squad after being accused of coercing confessions and withholding evidence in a high-profile murder investigation. Yet despite these red flags, Sheehan was handpicked to lead the investigation into the Central Park jogger case, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences for all involved. And it's worth noting that Sheehan had his own ties to the media, having previously served as a consultant for NBC News and other outlets. As the pressure to solve the case mounted, both Fairstein and Sheehan faced mounting financial incentives to secure convictions. Fairstein, who had already parlayed her high-profile career into a lucrative book deal, stood to gain even more from the success of the prosecution. Meanwhile, Sheehan was reportedly promised a promotion if he could close the case quickly and decisively. In this climate of ambition, media manipulation, and financial self-interest, it's no wonder that the Central Park 5 were railroaded into confessing to a crime they didn't commit. And while the individuals involved may have acted within the bounds of the law, the systemic forces that enabled their actions demand our scrutiny and attention. Only by acknowledging and addressing these hidden conflicts can we hope to build a more just and equitable criminal justice system for all. The Central Park 5, Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusuf Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise, were just teenagers when their lives were forever changed by a horrific crime and a relentless pursuit of justice. In April 1989, a young white woman was brutally attacked and raped while jogging in Central Park, and the 5 boys, all African American or Hispanic, were quickly arrested and coerced into confessing to the crime. Despite the lack of DNA evidence tying them to the scene, the teens were convicted and spent between 6 and 13 years in prison for a crime they did not commit. The case was a textbook example of racial bias and tunnel vision in the criminal justice system, but it also had deep financial implications that have only come to light in recent years. In 2014, a civil lawsuit brought by the Central Park 5 against the city of New York was settled for a staggering $41 million, more than $1 million for each year spent behind bars. The settlement was a rare instance of justice being served, but it also raised questions about who was really responsible for the wrongful convictions and why it took so long for the city to acknowledge its mistakes. A closer look at the financial records reveals that the case against the Central Park 5 was backed by powerful interests with deep pockets. The prosecution's key witness, a female jogger who was attacked in the park around the same time as the main victim, received a $250,000 reward from a private foundation for her testimony, a fact that was never disclosed to the defense. Meanwhile, the NYPD and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office spent millions of dollars on investigations, trials, and appeals, using taxpayer funds to pursue a case based on coerced confessions and flawed forensic evidence. The cost to the city was not just financial, but also social and emotional, as the lives of 5 young men were destroyed by a criminal justice system that failed them at every turn. The Central Park 5 case is a cautionary tale about the power of money and influence in the pursuit of justice. It exposes the hidden conflicts and systemic biases that can derail even the most seemingly open and shut cases, and underscores the need for transparency, accountability, and fairness in our criminal justice system. Only by acknowledging and addressing these issues can we hope to build a more just and equitable society for all. The Central Park 5 case serves as a stark reminder of the power dynamics at play in our criminal justice system. The case involved 5 Black and Latino teenagers who were wrongfully convicted of brutally attacking and raping a white female jogger in Central Park, New York City in 1989. It was a racially charged crime that sparked widespread fear and outrage in the city. However, the convictions of the 5 teens were later vacated in 2002 after another man confessed to the crime and DNA evidence confirmed his involvement. The exoneration of the Central Park Five raised serious questions about the role of money and influence in their prosecution. The investigation revealed that high-powered lawyers, including former Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, worked tirelessly to ensure that the convictions were upheld even in the face of mounting evidence pointing to their innocence. These lawyers had close ties to powerful politicians and business leaders in New York City, raising concerns about conflicts of interest and preferential treatment. Moreover, it was revealed that the police had coerced confessions from the five teenagers, using aggressive interrogation tactics and exploiting their youth and vulnerability. The teens were offered reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation, leading to false confessions that ultimately sealed their fate. The Central Park Five case highlights the need for transparency and accountability in our criminal justice system. It exposes the dangers of allowing money and influence to dictate the outcome of legal proceedings, as well as the risks of coercive interrogation tactics that can lead to false confessions. Moving forward, it is crucial that we implement measures to prevent similar miscarriages of justice from occurring in the future. This includes increasing transparency around prosecutorial decisions, ensuring that lawyers and law enforcement officials are held accountable for their actions, and implementing reforms to our criminal justice system that prioritize fairness and equality. The Central Park Five case is a painful reminder of the systemic biases and conflicts of interest that continue to plague our criminal justice system. But it also serves as a call to action, urging us to demand greater transparency, accountability, and fairness in our pursuit of justice. Only then can we hope to build a more just and equitable society for all. 30 years have passed since the Central Park Five case, but its impact lingers, a stark reminder of the systemic issues that still plague our justice system. The financial incentives and power dynamics at play during the prosecution of these five innocent men are as relevant today as they were then. In 2003, after years of struggle, the Central Park Five received a $41 million settlement from New York City, an unprecedented amount for wrongful conviction cases. However, this victory raises important questions about who ultimately pays the price when justice is corrupted by financial gain and political ambition. The victims here are not just the five young men whose lives were forever altered. They're also the countless others trapped in a system that prioritizes convictions over truth, where prosecutorial misconduct is often met with little more than a slap on the wrist. So, how can we effect change? First, stay informed. Follow investigative journalists who hold those in power accountable. Support organizations advocating for criminal justice reform and transparency. Engage in conversations about these issues, both online and offline. Second, demand action from your elected representatives. Insist on legislation that increases prosecutorial oversight, incentivizes integrity, and penalizes misconduct. Encourage them to allocate resources towards improving public defense systems, which often lack the necessary funding to provide adequate representation. Lastly, remember that change starts at home. Examine your own biases and privileges. Engage with your local community, attend city council meetings, volunteer for initiatives aimed at helping marginalized groups. Educate yourself and others about systemic inequalities and their impact on our society. The Central Park Five case is not simply a historical anecdote. It's a mirror reflecting the deep-seated flaws within our justice system. Let it serve as a catalyst for meaningful dialogue, policy changes, and personal introspection. Because only when we address these issues head-on can we truly hope to create a more equitable society for all.